Welcome to the Golf Fitness Bomb Squad podcast with Chris Finn, a production of P4S Golf. Welcome to the Golf Fitness Bomb Squad. My name is Chris Finn. I'm your host, and I am joined today by I'm pretty excited for today's guest. If you guys don't know him, let me see if you can guess as we go here. Quite the resume, very well known on tour. His resume may speak for himself. Golf Digest top 50 instructor, Golf Magazine top 100. Works with a lot of pro players on tour, just Lucas Glover, Robbie Shelton, Bill Haas, to name a few. He's coached 3 Walker Cup team members, #1 AMs, US AM champs. He's the host of the Tour Coach podcast. Tony Ruggiero is our guest today, and I am super excited to have Tony with us. Tony, welcome to the Golf Fitness Bomb Squad.
Well, Chris, thanks for having me. Fun. I always love sitting in and doing these things. Normally, like you said, I'm on the other side of the mic. So anytime you get to do this, it's a little different, when you're used to being the one peppering people with questions and getting them, drawing out answers out of them. So it's a little bit different. But like you said, I've been fortunate to teach a bunch of guys that are real good. And like most of the folks you named, obviously, spent a lot of time with those over the years. Lucas I worked with Lucas for five and a half years, and he's we quit working a few years back, but he's gone on and to do great things. And Robbie Shelton I taught from when he was a kid and up until a couple of years ago, and then Bobby Wyatt and Robbie were my 2 first really, really good young players. And and then Andy Ogletree has had a great run and doing some really cool things on live. I've been spending some time out there with him, and that's been kind of new. I mean, I think the one thing that is important for me, I'm 52, so I always say I'm circling the drain now, but is to continue to do new things and new experiences, right? And I'm still one of those that there's teachers that are phenomenal at what they do. Like you look at Mark Blackburn and you look at Scott Hamilton, and those guys, and they're out there on tour most every week. I don't enjoy being out there every week. Like, I feel like that's a little bit of being a babysitter. That's just my personality, right?
Yeah.
And but I still really enjoy and find a lot of fulfillment and passion in still teaching. Like, obviously, my favorite thing's developing young players. I mean, that's what I enjoy doing the most. I mean, if I had my real pick, I'd probably like to be a college basketball coach or something. If I was taller, more athletic, had better knowledge of it. But anyways,
that's funny. I give my dad a hard time. I played basketball in college, Division III. I said, Dad, I'm a 6'1" white guy who can only dunk on a breakaway. Why the heck did you let me keep playing basketball? You should have got me into a different sport.
There's a lot of truth to that, right? In fact, off the air, we talked a little bit about like your journey and stuff. And I went to a small school, Division II. Back then it was NAIA in '89, and at St. Mary's University in San Antonio. And they've done a really good job developing their golf program. And they got a great young coach there, Connor McCarthy, and they're building some cool things. When I went there, it was an NAIA school, and but the head men's basketball coach at that time was a man named Buddy Meyer, and he won over 300 games and had won a national championship. And you know what it's like being at a school that size. You can go sit right behind the bench,
100%.
And Coach Meyer had this old green pickup truck, and I was from Alabama and San Antonio, and he'd pick me up couple times, and he took me to a baseball game, and the game there, and hung out, and like I wanted to be him. I mean, I just wasn't good enough at basketball to go in that, but I obviously was a decent player and played a little after school and stuff. But the coaches and teachers that I were around, and I was fortunate just to be around people that were great at what they do and did. And I don't necessarily know at the time that I knew how great they were, but I would, all the people I looked up to and admired and that were heroes of mine. And I mean, we're all teachers and coaches, from basketball to football. I grew up a diehard Notre Dame fan in Alabama, which is tough, but Lou Holtz was, my idol. And,
Yeah.
I taught this sister and brother that were just both played some college. And their dad played football at Notre Dame and then also played for the Packers,
Oh
right?
wow.
And he was the backup center at the Packers, anyways. But he would. My favorite thing of the lessons was him sitting and telling me Lou Holtz stories.
Yeah.
I
I
mean, they
bet.
could
Yeah.
always get a lesson book because I'd love to hear those stories. So, anyways, I think uh, coaches and being a coach has always been something I've wanted to do, and that's probably why I enjoy it. But I enjoy the variety, like of developing juniors. I love teaching tour players, but I'm fortunate to be at a great place like Old Palm down in South Florida, and I mean, I still love teaching 10, 12, 15, 18 handicaps that are really, now the person that isn't going to listen and doesn't really want to get good, that thinks you're going to give them a miracle cure, probably isn't fun to me, and I don't need to do
I
it
mean,
anymore.
you get a few of those in instruction. We get a few of
Yeah,
those in the
right.
fitness world too,
Exactly.
right?
Oh yeah,
I thought I was
yeah,
going to
right.
walk in the gym and hit it 300 yards. Like all I had to do
Now,
was walk in, right?
I'm going to walk in your gym and ask you how to take 80 pounds off me in an hour,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
exactly.
right. But anyways, I still love working with all people, people of all abilities, as long as they're wanting to get better and uh, and fun. I mean,
Yeah,
at this stage, you want to have fun doing what you're doing.
for sure. Well, and so I'm curious. I know some of the questions when we've had other instructors on
Mhm.
that have worked high level, like where you work with some of the best players in the world. There, some of the questions. It's an interesting question. I never actually gotten to ask an instructor at your level. Like, how does your like journey of development get there? We talk a lot about player development, right? And how do you get from a 15 to a good junior player to playing on tour? As a coach, like, do you start? Does the typical instructor start with the higher handicap, and then how has your career evolved where you've gotten the opportunities to work with some of these amazing players?
Well, I mean, my journey was I think things have changed nowadays. I'm sure as you've watched fitness and you watch people come out, with the advent of YouTube and social media, somebody could be doing something for 30 minutes and they can, all of a sudden be self-proclaimed star, right? Uh,
It's amazing how many self-proclaimed
yeah.
there are.
And so I think that, there's this teaching players. It is cool. There can be parts of it that financially are great there are parts that, like, ego wise, it does make you feel good. But I think if I'm being critical of young people entering our business nowadays, that's what they're all trying to do,
Right.
right? And you see a lot of young guys that I heard somebody say, I hadn't been teaching that long. I'm real good with like tour players, but I'm not really good with beginners. Well, if you
Yeah.
can't teach a beginner, you sure as hell shouldn't be teaching a tour player,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I think there's this I off the air sometime I'd love to figure out. I'm wondering if it's the same in fitness. Like, you
Oh
got to
yeah.
start somewhere, right?
Mhm.
And but my journey was like, man, I wanted to just make a living when I started. When I first started, I was making a couple $100 a week down at a place in Perdido Key, uh, on the panhandle of Florida. I had my Ford Explorer repossessed, was making no money.
Yeah.
Everybody that knew me said, other than the couple teachers that helped me, thought I was crazy,
Yeah.
and I was crazy, but I wanted to do it. And uh, I had no power for a couple months, lived in a place. I mean,
Mhm.
I was starving.
Yeah.
And then, Hank Johnson and Wayne Flint called me and gave me an opportunity to teach at their golf school at Sandestin Beach Resort right down there on the Panhandle. And, it was it was the best opportunity I could ever have, and was able to make a living. But,
Yeah.
when I started with them, they basically said, here, I was young. I mean, I was learning, and they were like, if you'll teach grip, posture, pivot, get everybody's grip on there pretty good, face pretty good. You'll get them postured to where they're balanced. Balance was a huge deal back then, and
Mhm.
it's still a huge deal to me. And to not to digress, but I think it's overlooked now.
Yeah,
Everybody's putting all this stuff on social media, and you can look at the guy to dress, and the guy's so far out of balance. It's like, I mean, lucky he doesn't hurt himself. And
exactly.
so, but teach grip, posture, pivot. I'll never forget. They told me if you do this, you'll make 50 grand this year. I was
Yeah,
like, well, 50 grand when you just had your truck repossessed. I didn't even have clothes good enough to
that's
go to
like
the
that's like $1 million. You're a millionaire at
more
that
than a
point.
million, right? And so I was like, well, hell, I'll do that.
Yeah,
I
right.
mean, how hard can that be?
Yeah,
So right. So I did it. And you know, I wasn't around I mean, there were obviously some good players around, but I didn't teach good players.
yeah,
I learned to make people better.
hmm
And my development was like I got to where I could teach, if you will, tour players or people that were better because I got good at teaching people and helping people get better.
yep,
And then I was fortunate, like I talked about Bobby Wyatt and Robbie Shelton, and I started teaching Bobby Wyatt, and we laugh. I mean, I was, see, I mean, I'm only 20 years probably older than him, right, or 22 years older than me. So,
yeah,
like, we grew up together in some aspect, but teaching him and then Robbie, like, helped me learn not only how to teach and help, but like help me learn what good players wanted and needed.
yeah,
And they were vastly different human beings, different skill sets. And I did better at times than others with figuring out how to handle that. But I had to learn what they needed and how to help make them better. And at that time, they were by far the two biggest people I'd ever taught, and still, to be honest, up there. And but like they were incredibly important. I had to figure out how to keep making them better.
yeah,
And
exactly.
so, but I got to teach. My advice for people that want to teach players at that level is to develop somebody to that level,
Yeah,
right? Don't just go try to latch onto somebody that's already out
I can't I can't emphasize that more than you already have. I mean, stories are very similar. I started in a shed
there.
and literally was just, please, somebody work with me. And to this
Yeah,
day, 12,000 people later, when I look back at, from, I think some of the hardest people on the fitness side to work with are actually the amateurs, the 15 handicap, who's got 50 different things wrong with them at, 65 or whatever. And then you have kids in the junior side where you see this too, talking about developing people. I mean, but the cool thing for us is I have 3 tour players now who started with me in a shed, which is like so cool. And I just was lucky enough that they had good
right.
golf coaches that got them on tour. But like to work with those kids and see them as 12, 13-year olds, and now they're out, on the LPGA and PGA tour and watching them go through that. But to your point, I tell all the guys that start when they work here, they all want to work with the Kyle Berkshires or whoever
Mhm.
the big names are. And I'm like, hey, you got to help at least 1,000 just, regular amateurs first. And when you can do that with your eyes closed, then we'll talk about the next level.
Yeah,
and and
yeah.
so to your point, I think that's something that has definitely gets lost sometimes in the YouTube age or Instagram or,
Oh,
it's crazy how often that happens.
everybody's, well, what do I get these messages from young teachers. We do a lot of, as I've gotten older, mentoring younger coaches and teachers has become important. And Justin Parsons, Wayne Flint, Jax Court, myself have this, for any coaches that are out there, we have a free closed Instagram group called Golf Coach Development, and we do monthly free Zoom meetings where we bring on a guest. Butch was on in January. Justin always gets some guests. I get some guests, and it's just
Yeah, that's
helping
awesome.
young coaches, right? But like you get all these messages, and they're like, I've been doing this 3 years, and how do I get to like, man, like 3 years is nothing,
You're just
right?
learning to walk, man.
Yeah, I mean, and again, not to make people think that like you will get there, but it takes time,
It
you
does.
know?
Well, and I think there is no substitute for experience. That's for sure. You
Mhm.
can do as many self-help or YouTube videos or but at some
Right.
point you have to get out there and, rubber's got to meet the road. And
Mhm.
I think in particular, one question I definitely wanted to make sure we covered today is one of the things that we see and that obviously impacts what you do is the just myriad of different physical issues that people come with, whether
Mm-hmm.
they're kids and going through puberty and they're kind of like have no idea where their left hand and right foot are in relative relation to each other, whether they're a you know 50 45 55-year old person who's just a movement moron and just doesn't know how to move. I think that's what people don't understand. Is I always joke and say, you have somebody who's not a great athlete or world class athlete, they're going to have maybe one cheat. And so it's real easy. You block that one cheat and then they can only do it the way you're telling
Right.
them to do it. You have a world class athlete, they're going to have 15 different ones. And that's where a lot of the complexity comes in from a movement side for us. What's like, as you start working with somebody, whether, at whatever level, how has the body kind of influenced, or how will it influence kind of maybe priorities that you have, approaches that you look at, maybe goals that you have for that person? I'm just curious, kind of with your all the experience that you have, all the success you've had, like how do you kind of approach that?
Well, if we start with, let's start for this example with like the tour players and the high
Yeah,
level players, right? College tour, young professionals, high level, real high level juniors. I I like I have either Morgan or Colby or Aaron who works Colby down there. Like I I involve them in all of that instruction because I want to find out if they can do what I'm asking them to do.
yep,
Right, first and foremost, like I like to assess what I think is wrong with the golf swing, like why they're having trouble, whatever it is that's keeping them from being, every good player comes to you with something that they can't do or something that pops up that's keeping them. And like, so I like to analyze their golf swing, like based on like what I think, why is it that, what is it that's producing that they don't like? Then I like to have Aaron, Colby, Morgan, like, okay, can they physically do what I'm asking them to do?
that's so smart.
Right. And then if they can't, is it something we've got to teach around?
Hmm.
Or is it something that if they put a real plan together and work on it, that they can improve their body's ability to do it? Because those are vastly different people and vastly different problems. Right.
100%. Yeah.
Now I've found most of the time, if they get with somebody like you, they get with somebody like Colby or whatever, like, and they're willing to put the time in and it takes time, they can get where they can physically do it. Obviously, there's injury histories and
Yep.
things people were born with and crazy like that. But like, so I'm gonna like this is gonna piss some people off. But like like this
You're on the
whole
right. I love it. Let's go.
so this whole deal, like, and this goes to like the recreational golfer too. Like this whole deal of just measuring people and then just saying, well, like this guy's, we're going to just leave him leaned on his left side because it's easier for him, right?
Yeah.
Like that's assuming that guy never wants to put in any effort and never work to make a change physically for the better.
Right.
That, like, to me, I'm a coach, I'm a teacher. So I want to help people get better. Well, like golf to me, and you may have a different opinion, like it's a rotary sport, right? And
Yep.
so I'm a
100%.
right-handed guy. So you wind up into your right side and you drive off your right side and you rotate through over your left. Like that's the most efficient and best way to swing and deliver and powerful way to deliver a golf club, in my
Yeah.
opinion, if the person can do it. Right.
Yeah.
And
And
so
there's lots
like,
of science to back you up on that too.
right. And and so I said, like, if we're going to just take somebody and lean them on their left because they're not very good or they measure this or that, like, well, that's limiting how good they can get.
Hmm.
And so, and that also assumes that they're not willing to make some changes to improve some things that would allow them, do they have to have the ability to wind up into their trail hip like Roy McIlroy? No. But if they can get a little, like, to me, especially with the recreational golfer, and I'm terrible with degrees and stuff like that, and you can speak to this, but like, I mean, if we could get them an extra 10 degrees, that might be a game changer for an 18 handicap.
Oh, it's massive. Well, I think particularly, talking Rotary and all the research we've done. I
Hmm.
mean, there's basically four Rotary centers, right? And the two biggest being, or most important, being the hip and the shoulder. And
Hmm.
maximal hip, particularly an 18 handicap, probably is not swinging crazy fast.
Right.
You're looking at 40 degrees, 45 degrees, maybe like best. So 10 degrees is literally a 25% improvement. And most
Hmm.
people, when they show up, we have them do the test. 90% of people don't have 40 degrees, like literally 9 out of every 10 golfers. So, so when
Right.
you're talking about, let's say most people average probably right around 10 to start, depending on their situation. I mean, you go from 10 to 20. I mean, you've gone from 25% to halfway there, and
Hmm.
that's a massive change.
Yeah. I spoke to up in Oklahoma yesterday to a bunch of teachers, and I had everybody stand up in the room and do that. I do this all the time I do this most every lesson with a recreational golfer. Like I start with just having them get in their golf posture and stand and balance on each leg
Hmm.
and try to make a pivot on that leg.
Yeah,
Right. And it's like you just like 99% of them wobble, almost fall down.
yeah,
Even tour players do it a lot the first time, right?
yeah,
And I'm like, look, before we get anything crazy, like you're a 15, 18, 20 handicapper, want to get better, blah, blah, blah. Let's just get you balanced better and get you more stable, right? Like that, and most people, if you show them that and you, you give them something to do, single leg, one or two things to do, and go do it for 5 minutes a day, they'll do it.
yeah,
And people, but they will. And especially like if you do it in a lesson and you put them on one leg and you have to do pivot drills, on each leg, and then you have them hit balls, come back and do it again, and they all of a sudden can start feeling that they're getting more stable on the foot, not wobbling as much. Well, then all of a sudden you can, you film them and you got them on their swing cat or whatever, and you got your TrackMan or your quad, and you can show them that things are getting better. Well, then they buy into it more.
100%. Yeah, if you can give them a immediate feedback loop, that's the number one
And
way to drive clients.
people aren't stupid. Like they can look, if you tell somebody just to hang on their left leg and take their right arm and go up and down like this, I mean, it's going to hit a pitch shot more solid. But they're smart enough when you film them and show them that there isn't anybody in the whole world that's worth a shit that does that. There's
Amen to that.
nobody, right?
Yeah,
So like, when they go home, they're like, I mean, yeah, I hit it a little better off that mat, but like that doesn't make sense.
no,
I think our
that doesn't look
job's to
like
coach,
a driver swing I've seen on TV.
right? But there's people out there measuring, they're doing all this stuff, man, and it's to me like saying, you know, we're just going to lean you over there because it's easier, or we're going to let you slide way over here because you measure to be way trail. Like to me, that's just saying we're just not going to take the time to help you improve your body or teach you or coach you. To me, that's the
Yeah,
easy
well,
way.
I think we see it in fitness a bunch where there's to me there's theories, and then there's people who actually will do the research, and like, does it actually influence an outcome? So I think one of the
Mm-hmm.
best examples that I have, just from personally, we were looking at power tests related to club head speed, because club head speed to me is really the only direct connection that physical has to golf. After that, it's all skill.
Mm-hmm.
You can swing the club as fast as you want, but it doesn't matter if you're hitting it off the top of the
Right.
top of the face. Ball speed doesn't matter, right? It's not going to translate. There's other things that influence all the other outcomes on the golf course, but that to me, so we looked at some of the more famous tests, where like a seated chest pass, a vertical leap, a sit up and throw, right? And so we actually looked at all those, and we looked, and number one, sit up and throw didn't have any correlation whatsoever. So statistically speaking, meaning like no relationship to club head speed, right? And this is we look at our database at this point, it's like over 12,000. So we were able to look at population level data, and then we start looking at, all right, well, let's look at vertical, and let's look at. And we actually said we were testing like a shot put throw, right, with a medicine ball, and so shot put actually had statistically speaking, a correlation, as did chest pass and vertical. Right. So, and I think so that's where to me that's where most people stop. Right. They say, oh, most people who do this seem to there's a relationship, and so
Right.
then that becomes like, oh, we did the science. I think the interesting thing was then as we dig deeper, you start to actually see now you start looking at causality, which is what you're talking about. Hey, we did this. Does this cause a change on the TrackMan or on the
Mm-hmm.
quad, or like is there a measurable change performance wise? And the interesting thing was as we started looking at the population data, if you increase vertical or you increase an upper body push pass, you're going to statistically increase club head speed. Like that can happen. There's a causational relationship. When those go up, club head speed goes up. If you look at the shot put and you increase shot put, there's not a causational relationship unless vertical or upper body improved as well, right? So then all of a sudden you say, well, okay, well that makes sense, I guess, but we don't know. We don't need to do that test. And so unfortunately, I think what's happened in this age of, assess, don't guess, and let's just measure everything is we're measuring and finding these elements, particularly in the physical world, where it's like, hey, these look related. Well, that's cool, but does it actually cause what we think it's causing? And I think we kind of a lot of times kind of will jump to that conclusion, and that's something we saw in the fitness world. And to your point, like prove it. Like, all right, you did this, made this change. Now we did an initial test. Let's do a retest. And does it actually cause the change?
Yeah, I did this. So I did this thing yesterday for some teachers at Oklahoma, and I had a slide up because I hate doing slideshows. Um, but and my slide was why measure when you can guess, right? That's what I put up, right?
isn't
And
that
everybody,
isn't that the that's like the mantra of golf in general, isn't it?
right? So they're all the opposite, right? Why guess when you can measure? And I put up why measure when you can guess. Everybody looked at me. I'm like, I mean, that's look. At one point, everybody believed and scientifically thought the world was flat. Okay, yeah. We're all operating within the best info that we've got, and we're all trying. And but nobody has through measuring and all this stuff like something that nobody else has. That's what drives me crazy in our business. People come on and whether they're fitness or they're mental or they're teaching, and they all they all want to portray they've got something nobody else has, right? And that if you go do this, that's the secret. That's going to make you better. And I mean, that's just not how it is, right? Getting better takes hard work, a commitment to a plan with people that really care about you, that's based in real fundamentals and physics, geometry, fitting on the fitness side. And there's medicine behind that, what your body can and can't do and all that. Like, man, it's like, nobody's going to come put a baseball mitt in your hand or a tape measure and tell you to do something that nobody else can figure out that's going to make you a tour player.
So you're telling me there's no magic pixie dust that can be spread on, just dropped on someone.
My old mentor Hank HJ used to call it pixie dust. He'd always say we'd give them the pixie dust at the end, and normally that was like fixing their ball position or something.
Yeah.
And I think too that and we talked about the YouTube and the Instagram age, and I certainly benefited from Instagram. A lot of people follow, and I have fun with it. But people think that fixing a player is sometimes this grandiose, complicated thing. When I can't tell you how many times I've flown to a tour event or shown up at a player's house and golf course, and the reason they'd been playing shitty for 3 weeks was their hip posture was out of whack.
Yeah.
Or their ball position. And then their ball position was 2 balls too far back. Yeah. Right? We didn't have to measure to do that.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Use your eyes. Use some deductive reasoning and some experience. And, saying that I always go back to that my old mentor used to say was, you can't get 10 years of experience in one day less than 10 years. Right? And you and I could make, we could have worked together for 10 years under the same guy, and you took notes, studied and all that. And I went to the bar every night, partied and passed out. You probably would have got more out of the 10 years than I did, but we still got 10 years.
10 years.
I think a lot of people are wanting to, I think they think that there's a circuit around that. And I just don't think there is.
Yeah, no, we see that in the fitness world too, particularly get young coaches coming in and they're like, I've been grinding. I'm like, dude, you've been here 18 months.
Right.
That's not a long time.
Well, and for me, what you guys do is so important, because I went to the part where I said hey, I want to know if they can or can't. Yep. Okay. And so I've obviously dealt with and deal with a lot of good young juniors. Right. And to me, if they get with somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, I see a lot of them get hurt.
Oh yeah.
Right. And I would love this maybe for off this, but I see a lot of kids go into people that, I'm not saying a lot of them are great, but everything is about speed. And so they're doing all this stuff to create speed, and they're not strong enough or stable enough to handle it. Like a lot of these, to me, it seems like a lot of the young people, they're plenty flexible enough, right? So it's not a flexibility issue like it is with a, 50-year-old guy that comes to see us,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
But they're not near strong enough or stable enough to handle the load and the stuff that they're being put on in the gym. And then, then they can go do this, and then they can put a club in their hand and a monitor, and the speed spikes.
Yep.
But like, one, can they actually control the golf ball doing it? And two, can their body withstand that and they not hurt themselves? And I think that's why it's so important to go to people like you that are, and as a teacher, if I'm a teacher listening to this, man, I'd find the best person at what you do in my area to use.
Yep.
Because if somebody's hurt, they're not paying either of us any money.
Amen to that.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
and a lot of them will quit. A lot of them, if they get hurt, will just assume that the working out with the golf thing is a bad thing, not going to help them, and they just quit doing it.
Yep.
And that's bad for their game and for their body.
Yeah. Well, and I think, and I mean, the number of times I've seen, I mean, I've seen it both ways, right? Somebody goes and does something stupid at the gym and they get hurt, and they're like, "Oh, working out's bad." Or somebody goes, I've seen someone go take a lesson. The golf pro doesn't tell them to do anything wrong, but the person just can't do what they're being asked to do. Their back is sore the next day, and they're like, "Oh, that golf pro sucks." Like, like you weren't you just weren't ready for it, and I think
Right.
that's, I think inherently, I think that's the impetus behind all the research that we've done is looking at, at this point at the data levels where we can say, hey, based on your mobility, this is your predicted safe swing speed, and this is based on your strength numbers, power test wise, looking at people who we've been able to look at injury histories and types of people who get hurt based on age, but also more importantly, like, hey, how fast are they swinging it? What are their physical characteristics that they tend to have in terms of strength and being able to control it, or mobility, being able to control it? And and where do you stand? I think the scary part for everybody listening, to hopefully they listen to this, is 90% of people are swinging faster, and this is probably a testament to how good instruction and equipment is. They're swinging faster than what their body can handle. We're talking
Yeah.
amateurs, like, because their technique is efficient, particularly single digits, right? They're efficient. They have optimized equipment, and you look, and I mean, we've got guys, that'll come in and they're swinging, 110 miles an hour, and you look at their mobility is sucks. their
Yeah.
their strength is terrible, and you're like, hey, you're like, your safe swing speed's probably like 95. Like, you're like, we've seen people 10, 20 miles below physically what they're actually doing, and then the question is, well, then how can I swing that fast? It's like, well, you can use elasticity, you can use I mean, there's other technical areas, or width, there's other things you can do technically to optimize those speeds. And so that's where, then I think, for everybody listening, when you're working with that person locally, your goal should not, I mean, your goal ultimately, if you want to get faster, can be to get faster. The questions about, and this is, I always say this time, I say, getting speed is easy. Like, a monkey can get somebody faster. Just literally grab your driver and swing as hard as you can 30 times every single day, and your speed probably is going to go up. But safe speed is the true, to me, the true measure of the doing it the right way, where you really kind of close the gap between what somebody's speed is and what they physically can do, and then eventually get it to where they actually have a buffer the other way. That's when we start talking about longevity and staying healthy and those sorts of things. But I mean, to your point, I think it's sexy to go after speed, and it's very compelling when you say, hey, look, I swung 100. Now do this. And 10 minutes later, I swung 105. Oh, this was going to help me. But to your point, A, can you control it? And B, physically, is your body going to be able to withstand that? Or are you going to, the reason we call it the bomb squad is, literally the people who swing faster. We call them ticking time bombs. We say, look, I don't know when you're going to get hurt, but you may not get hurt, but the likelihood that you're going to get hurt based on all the data is extremely high, because either it's because you don't have the mobility, or you don't have the strength, or both. And so, I think that's important for people to realize.
No, I agree. And I think that, like when I coach, a lot of times I'll have somebody, and I'll say, you know, I'll have them hit shots at what they feels like 60%.
Yep.
right? And they normally get it where they smash it. For them, it's really, really good. And I have them go up at what they feels like 10% intervals, right?
Yep.
And then I said, we're going to figure out what's the speed and the level that you can play at,
Yep.
where you can do this, whatever percentage we get to, where if you go faster, you can't do it very often and you can't stay in balance and all of that.
Yep.
Like, well, then you haven't got to the point where you can physically, and whether it's physical from strength and mobility or stability standpoint, or whether it's haven't learned the movement pattern and the motor skill enough to do it at that
Exactly.
speed, right? That's a big thing people don't like. They assume that because they're trying to do something that they can do it.
Yep.
Right. And I had a doctor come to me in Philly, and anyways, I tell the story like a few years ago, and I, hey, how'd you find, hear about me, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, I followed you on Instagram. And he's like, I'm a neurosurgeon. And I was like, well, shit, instantly I knew he was way smarter than me.
Yeah.
And, and he was like, hey man, all the stuff you do with your bands, like that's how people learn.
Yep.
And he explained to me, which I already kind of knew, but like, I don't think people understand that when you put a ball in their hand, a ball in the tee, club in their hand, they go full speed. I mean, their brain goes into performance mode. I mean,
Yep.
It just does whatever the hell you know how to do. And
exactly.
if that's sliding and twisting and throwing, that's what comes out, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you've got to replace that. You've got to replace that and change that movement pattern, and that takes time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it takes time. It takes reps, and I mean that's the old adage of the 10,000-hour rule, right?
Yeah, I had
you can't replace experience and practice.
I had an LPGA player on the tee end of the summer, and hit a bunch of shots a lot better. Some weren't good. Person with it was like, well, got to have it better next week. And this was first or second lesson. I was like, well, man, wow. I was like, well, I mean, this is gonna sound crazy, but I didn't invent the human body or the process in which our brain learns and acquires motor skills, right?
Yeah, right.
That ain't my gig. That's somebody else upstairs.
Yeah, right.
So like, and anybody that tells you that they've got a secret to get around that is lying.
Yeah,
it's how we're wired, right?
Yes, they are.
Right? Anybody tells you can come into my bag and I'm going to give you to do these two things, and we're going to do this, that, and the other, and it's going to override how you motor skill learn, is full of shit. Yep. Don't pay them money.
No, it's good. It's good. Sounds good on the marketing front, but ultimately going to be let down or hurt, one or the other.
Right, hurt. And I mean, I think that's one of our biggest things with all the quest for speed is, man, like I see more and more 40, 50, 60-year-olds consumed and 100% believe that they could get to these crazy speed numbers.
Yep. Yeah, it's wild. And they think that, oh, I'm just going to do speed training or, whatever, name the device, right? I'm just going to do that.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. But I think to me, that's kind of our big, if I had a soapbox, it's like literally more than 9 out of 10 of you physically already going too fast for where you're at, like in terms of your longevity and likelihood of getting hurt. And that's why guys have the back issues or the elbow issues, or right. And it's like, now you want to throw more speed on that. Like you want to put more floors on a crappy foundation like that. That's just not going to end well. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people who will say, yeah, whatever. And then, 3 months later, so I went and tried that speed training, but now I'm hurt. Can you help me?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, dude, if you did what I told you 3 months ago, you'd be swinging faster and be fine right now.
Yeah, I mean, half of what Andy Ogletree and Colby and I work on is Colby making his body able to do the stuff he needs to do to play good, but us all working together to keep him healthy, because he's been a guy that gets dinged up.
Yeah.
Right? Hip, had a left, had his labrum torn, repaired. His wrist gets to hurting because he'll, and so like helping him understand how he's got a load going back so that he's got room to turn into his lead leg. Because if he doesn't, he starts adding side bend and then he shoves it forward and then his wrist hurts. Like, so it's like, with the speed, I don't think you'll get the speed that these guys create now, and girls. like you gotta have somebody that really knows what they're doing.
You do, yeah, and I think that's the like I think like just to the I guess to finish on the speed topic, like this is the like we had Kyle Berkshire came over in June. He had the WD out of his
Mhm.
first event ever of his career. He had world championships in like 12 weeks, right? And so he's like, hey, I got like literally came in. The guy couldn't. This guy swings 100. And I think when he came, he was swinging like 160. He couldn't
Mhm.
swing a pitching wedge 60 miles an hour without his oblique spazzing and like basically like just could not do anything, right? And so literally, so 8 weeks later, we or however it was 8, 10 weeks later, we're at world championships. At this point, we know with him, and this is I think to your point of understanding each player's body and having that team with the swing coach, the physical side. And we knew that if we could keep his trunk rotation, for him it was trunk rotation. If we kept his trunk rotation over 70 degrees both ways, he was going to be okay. The second
Yep.
that starts creeping below, that's when everything was going to start to go. Like basically we had like injury was like at 60, 65 was red line. So we had to keep him above 70. And so literally the strategy for him at world championships was after every single set, we were measuring and like, all right, are we back? Oh no, you tightened up that way. Let's get it loose again before the next set. And it was to that degree of understanding, and then obviously because then he tightens, he would change how he's swinging the golf club, and things
Mhm.
would go poorly. That's literally the only way. That's how we got him, physically kept him physically able, so he could do the amazing thing he did in winning his third belt. But it was to that level of degree of like we know exactly when that body is going to start tightening, and that's going to be the predictor of when stuff could go wrong again. We got to
Mhm.
catch it and try to get it back. And I think to what your point, and his swing coach was there, his long drive coach was there. I mean, it was like that team approach of understanding, hey,
Yeah.
we know what his body can do and what shape it needs to be in to do it. And if it gets below that, then we got problems. And I think to your point, that's so important for everybody to hear. But
I think that's a big. I think that's a big deal, and I think that's why you see more and more good instruction programs that include or have on staff or they're partners with really good. And to me nowadays, and I don't know what all you guys do, but like it's not just the workout and the fitness, but it's treatment,
everything, yeah,
all of that stuff, right? The
yep.
ability to provide treatment and uh, you know stuff to repair, how to treat people in their downtime, all that stuff is
Well,
part of it,
particularly
and
on the
it's
tour
not just
levels,
for the
it's the
pros.
recovery and
Mhm.
helping them repair is
Right?
probably more so what you end up spending a lot of your time on,
Yeah,
particularly in season, recovering from travel and all that sort of stuff.
yeah, for sure.
So, but hey, Tony, just to wrap, like, just curious if you had to leave people kind of with one kind of tip or one takeaway from today, amateur as well as or young professionals, teaching professional maybe that's listening, what would be kind of a piece of advice that you would share with them?
Oh, shoot. So for the teaching professional, I would tell you, I think it's important to not just go try to copy other people that are successful, right? I think
Yep.
we have a lot of copycats out there. I peruse through Instagram and I see a bunch of people doing the stuff I put out, and you see them doing it half of it wrong, and
Yeah.
right. There was this guy we were laughing about that. I mean, using a drill I always did. We had taught with him, and he put the box in the wrong place, right?
That's hilarious.
Like total for what the guy's trying to do. And we were all, but be authentic, be yourself, figure out who you are as a teacher, the things you believe, write down. I think it's a great exercise to go write down what it is you think is important in the golf swing and for a development of a player, and write it all down. It's harder to do than you think,
Yeah.
and like to have to actually do it, you got to start thinking about the crap you say to people. Like, well, I think it's a really good exercise for anybody to do.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And then for just the recreational golfer, any golfer listening, man, like there's so much good help out there now, but do your research when you're looking for somebody. And
Hmm.
I would tell people to do this when you're looking for a golf instructor. We'll start with the instructor. You want to go to somebody who at some points made somebody good, right? Like,
You mean you want a proof of concept?
right, exactly. Like what, like, would you go to a doctor who everybody they go to dies? Right? I mean, you wouldn't,
Yeah.
right?
You probably
But
wouldn't know.
but so don't just believe Instagram or whatever. Like, and there's ways to research it and do it. Heck, you can ask. I have people all the time DM or email me and be like, "Hey, I listened to you and I'm moving to Butte, wherever. Who should I go see around there?" And I'll say, "Well, hey, let me ask a few people and find out. Like, find somebody that's had success, and also find somebody that has resources to surround you with. Like, you may not need somebody that works you out every week, but you need somebody to help you put a plan together so you can get better, right? And you need all the resources around you if you want to get better."
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tony. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. And just for where people can find you or kind of get connected with you or anything you're doing, what's the best place for people to connect with you?
God, I hate to admit this, but on Instagram, this is so embarrassing. At the Dew Sweeper on Instagram is probably the easiest. We have a bunch of stuff on YouTube. Either two, you can type in the Dew Sweeper, but any of those is probably the easiest. I mean, that's how everybody messages me now. I don't have any hot chicks slip in my DMs. I have old golfers wanting help with their game. I mean, my life's pitiful.
That's more what the golfer should be looking at to help their
True,
golf game.
true.
Cool. Awesome.
All right.
We will definitely.
I appreciate you. Appreciate you having me on, and would love to pick your brain sometime and talk more about it. This has been fun for me.
Yeah, for sure, Tony, and definitely we'll put everything in the show notes for everybody listening. Also, you obviously have your website, Dew Sweepers, golf.com.
DewSweepersGolf.com.
So
Yeah.
definitely check that out, everybody. Definitely one of the best resources in the golf instruction world. One of my most enjoyable interviews that we've done. So thanks again, Tony, for hopping on, and we look forward to maybe we'll have you on sometime soon down the road too.
I appreciate it, Chris. Y'all have a good one.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.